So I think the time is up for us to start. Welcome to this first meeting on the Microsoft Data Platform User Group. I'm Brian, your host for this evening. I've brought with me James Reeves, who will have the honor of his presentation for an end-to-end solution for an affordable data warehouse. When I hand it over to you, James, you can just present yourself. I have a small thing to show you because, as you know, perhaps you know that the SQL Bits is rolling in March in Wales, and if you haven't bought your ticket yet, I can share with you a discount code. Nice. You get 5% off your SQL Bits tickets if you use this discount code. If you can't remember it, then it's just user group 5 and then Microsoft Data Platform User Group Denmark. Or else take a screenshot and then you have 5% off. The early bird tickets are running out, so perhaps you can save even more money by using this one. So that was just my small gift for today. And then I will hand it over to you, James.
Thank you very much. So I will preface this entire thing with, unfortunately, my mother had a stroke at Christmas time, and it's set me back a little bit in terms of preparation. So I still wanted to show everyone, because we had this already set up. I still want to show everyone the solution and the component parts. It will be a more polished presentation in future, but for now, the point is that you can make a data warehouse on a budget fairly easily as well. There's quite a lot of resources available online, which I will reference. So I will just share this PowerPoint slide, which just says who I am. You can look at me and see who I am, but I am I'm known
handsome as always, James.
Well, with less hair now. I've shaved the hair. So look, share window and slide. Everyone seeing that okay?
I can't see it. There you go. Yeah. Thank you. Gotcha.
So I didn't have much hair then either, even though that picture was about 5 years ago. So I've been working in SQL predominantly, and then Power BI I saw being a major force 6 years ago, I think. I was whilst I was at Santander, actually, so that was somewhere between 2012 and 2017. So between 5, 6, 7 years ago, I thought Power BI is going to be the thing. I set up my own company called Power BI Limited. I was way too early to the market. Power BI was going to be a thing, but I jumped far too quickly. So I reverted and went back to doing perm work, contract work, etc. But I've been across a few businesses, so quite a few finance businesses, also telecoms. But the company we have now is Data Quality. So that's our lovely logo I'm demonstrating here on my chest. So it's me and my colleague Chris. We are Data Quality, and we do end-to-end. So we do SQL, we do data warehousing, we do Power BI, SQL being on-prem or cloud. We do the entire data platform essentially. So that is me. You can see the reason I mentioned that Power BI leaping too early bit is I chose my LinkedIn link, my title, as Power BI Limited. And unfortunately, once you've chosen it, you can't change it.
Yeah.
So it's a great name. I'm glad I've got it, but it actually doesn't represent really what we do. So there we have that. So I'll just close that. Right. So I'll show a different screen. We're not going to live in PowerPoint land today. We've all seen PowerPoints. I'm sure you'd rather.
Before you start the actual demo and presentation, I should just perhaps mention to the attendees that I've enabled the Q&A section here in Teams. So if you have any question, just write it there, and then I'll interrupt abruptly James in his speak and ask the question. So
No worries. Thank you. How many people have we got today out of interest?
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 until now. Plus
Nice.
me, that's 17. So, yeah.
So it was quite funny. Whilst I was putting it together, I was trying to reference where I had pulled the data from, where I pulled ways of doing things from. And Denmark represents a hell of a big part of this skill set of people out there. I was pulling things in, I didn't realise that guy was from Denmark, or that guy, or that guy. So all the stuff we got together is pretty much written by Denmark.
Right.
I've just pulled things together in a nice way. There we have that. Let me just put you to the side. Okay, so in terms of a enterprise data warehouse, there are multiple ways of doing it. I mean, today, if you're doing a completely greenfield project where you've never done it before, I probably would go Databricks. So looking at Microsoft, they have architectures available to demonstrate certain things, and they show here on the screen. Your data sources on the left. You use Azure Data Factory to pull it into Data Lake, and then you use Databricks to process that data, ultimately ending up on there. You've got level 6 on this diagram is Azure SQL Database, and then pushing out to Power BI for visualization or machine learning, etc. What I'm going to demonstrate today is actually a slightly altered version of that. But the reason I show this, because it's an awesome tool. If you are new to Azure, you're not sure how to install resources, you're not sure how to get these resources to talk to each other, there's a little bit of setup involved. There is literally, got to find it now somewhere, a one-click button. Where is it?
I think it was in deploy this scenario there.
Where's that? Towards the top?
No, if I remember this correctly, it's just below the scenario details. You have a deploy this
Okay.
thing just a bit down. Down.
Deploy a scenario.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So there's a link there. Takes you to GitHub, if I remember. That doesn't need to GitHub,
Yes,
sorry.
exactly.
The code is in GitHub, but the button isn't. So you literally click this button, and you just get to decide a few things. You get to say, do I want a Key Vault? Do I want a SQL database? Do I want an Event Hub? They're the three things you have a choice of. For the example I'm showing you today, I chose yes to all three of those because it gives you everything set up so that you can do things if you want to, but actually they don't cost anything if you don't use them. So Azure Data Factory we absolutely will use. That's a great tool for picking data up from somewhere, whether that's on-premise, whether that's cloud, whether that's a web end or an Excel file. Data Factory can pretty much do it all. Azure Data Lake Storage, I've enabled it, but we're not using it in this example. Azure Databricks, again, I've enabled, but we're not using. Azure Key Vault, I've enabled, which is great because when you're setting things up in Data Factory, you can actually set your usernames, passwords, etc. up in a Key Vault, and then just call that Key Vault to get the current value. So if you've got a password that changes, you don't have to change it in 10 places. You just change it in the Key Vault. Same thing as if you need to lock something out, you can lock it in the Key Vault, and anything referencing it will stop working. So the Key Vault is a good idea. So I would recommend it. Azure SQL Database, absolutely, that's actually what we're going to use. Although it's not the cheapest, I would say the cheapest is probably Databricks, or you could even go Power BI. Power BI can get data, it can store data, it can present data. So if you wanted the ultimately cheapest data warehouse, if you're a small business, you might consider going down the Power BI route. However, it's not and I'll use quotes here, it's not a proper data warehouse. But it might be good enough for your needs, and then you're not dealing with multiple tools and things like that. So for that, I would reference. My understanding is he's from Denmark. What's his full name?
Just Blindbæk.
Yeah. So this guy. So there's a website called justbe.dk, and he talks about a traditional modern data warehouse on GitHub, which you can click on here. and it's very similar to what we're going to do, apart from he does use Data Lake in some of his examples, and I think he uses the Power BI XMLA endpoint. So if you want to do more details which have been written down, Just's website is a great place to go to. What I'm showing is just to me at least, a simpler version. So if you are completely new to, if you want a data warehouse, you're not really sure what you need. So the reason I'm steering away from Databricks is that tends to require, it doesn't require, but it's better if you have Python knowledge. And not everyone has Python knowledge. You might have people in your team or yourself have SQL knowledge. I find that's more of a common level, that if someone's got a technical language, SQL they can get quicker than many of the others. So this solution is cheap, but it's it could be cheaper, but then you have the cost just moves. You need skill set, and then you have to pay them. So when I say cheap, it's encompassing actually what you pay Microsoft, but also what you pay to set it up, and also what you pay to maintain it. So the idea is it's the cheapest overall. So we are using Data Factory to pull the data. We land it in SQL database. That is where the Data Factory, where the data warehouse code all lives as well. And then we use Power BI to point at it. So it's minimal. You've got Data Factory, SQL database, Power BI. They're your resources. So as long as you know SQL, you're good, because that's the data warehouse element, and the all your data will be in there. And presuming you want to visualize it somewhere, Power BI is a great place to do it, because again, it points at things quite readily, easily. So you click this button, and what you end up with, you have to select that you do want Key Vault, SQLDB, and one of the others, can't remember what it was. The only thing I don't like about it is you don't get to choose the names. Now, because there's certain uniqueness requirement within the Azure portal, they just do a random string, and this is what you end up with on screen. They're all in the same location. What's really good about the one-click setup is it's set up so that Data Factory comes pre-configured with a link service to the Azure Data Lake, the Key Vault, and the SQL database that's been configured as part of this deployment. So you're almost immediately ready. You know, you don't have to go do this and go do that and go do that. If your data was coming from cloud resources, so Salesforce or Dynamics CRM or any one of the others which are cloud, you could actually just move forward from this point. In this example, because I thought it was quite a common example, we're pulling data out of an on-premise SQL Server. So there is a little bit of extra configuration, which is quite easy. So if you go into the main page of Data Factory, so I'm running on an assumption that people have some knowledge of the things being demonstrated. I'm just pulling them together in a way which makes things easy. That one-click button from Microsoft is really helpful. When you configure Databricks, when you first configure it, if you don't configure it right, you end up not being able to do it within a certain network, and then your data moves in and out of secure networks. What I really like about this one click is it deploys it properly, so everything talks to each other within the same network in a secure fashion. It's secure by design. So if you're not all that experienced with Azure, it's literally click a button and you've got pretty much everything set up. I thought it just accelerated the learning curve. So what you would do is you would come to datasets and you'd click on, you'd create a new dataset. And when you do that, you'd say that you want to get data from on-premise, and they'll go, well, what integration runtime do you want to run? And if you haven't got one configured, then you just click new, and it installs like a gateway on your on-premise server, whether that's your own machine potentially, like mine is in this example. But you can then move anything from within your network, you can funnel through to Data Factory through that gateway. Very easy. You might need IT to give you admin rights to install something somewhere, but it's a one-click install, which is really nice. So I will show you. Okay, so I've set up some copy data activity that I'm. Oh, sorry, what I should say, where I got this data from, because what I intend to do at the end is give you all of these links and give you all of these resources so you can do these things yourself. And one of the hardest things actually is getting a sample, a decent sample database that you can run with, so you can experiment on. So what I found is at Data Goblins, Kurt Bueller at Data Goblins, he's got an article about Learn Power BI with sample data sets, and he talks it through. So it's actually from another place, SQL BI, which if you're into Power BI, you will know the famous people over there. It literally talks you through step by step how to get yourself, how to generate yourself a test database, how to end to end, how to configure it, and what you end up with. Sorry, let me just change which screen I'm sharing.
While you're doing that, I have a question from Henrik asking, do I need a license for the on-prem database gateway?
No. My understanding is you don't. So the gateway itself doesn't give you anything other than the ability to move data from A to B. So if you have an on-prem SQL Server, you should have a license for that, because you should have a license for it anyway. But if it's in developer mode, because you are purely experimenting, then you don't even need a license for the SQL Server either. So you could do this thing end to end without an official license, could you? Let me just think about that. So you could do SQL Server developer if you are legitimately developing. Please don't use it for production. It's not supposed to be used for that as a license quote. The gateway will just help you move data from A to B. Well, it opens the gateway, opens the door. Data Factory moves it. It lands in Azure SQL DB, for which you do have a license because you've purchased it and installed it. You can save money actually on the Azure SQL DB if you already have a SQL Server license that you can apply to it. That actually makes your database cheaper, but you don't need it. You can do without it. It just makes it a bit cheaper. About 40% cheaper, I think, last time I checked.
Yeah, 40%. Yeah, but yeah. So the answer to this question is that the gateway is free of charge. You can just download it and install it anywhere on premise, and then it opens up the tunnel between on-prem and Azure.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. And just to finish that piece off, if you are using Power BI, again, if you're not sharing it, then no, you don't need a license. If you are sharing it, it's a $10 a month for Power BI license, or if you've got an E5 Microsoft license, it's free anyway. So this entire thing could be done end to end with no licensing. So when I build it as a cheap solution, it's because you don't have to pay for licensing, you just pay for consumption. Obviously, in a production environment, you would have licensing costs, but I wouldn't say they were costs of this solution, because your on-prem server, those costs are there whether you have this solution in place or not. So show you. So the database that generator created is this Contoso database here, and it gives you these tables. So it's orders. Well, the way they've done it is orders and order lines.
James, right now we're seeing a Analytics DB on the screen.
Should be seen as SQL DB. The local host, is that what we're showing?
No. Or else it's just my screen that is frozen.
Maybe. Let's have a look. I'll stop and start again. How's that?
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and I've got, fortunately for me, in my day-to-day life, I've got a 49-inch ultra-wide curved screen, which is amazing, apart from when you want to share something, because then it's awful. So we have this demo database. There are others available. There's AdventureWorks, there's Northwind, there's really weirdly named World Wide Web. No, sorry, Wide World Web.
Is it Worldwide Importers or something?
Yeah, that's why it's named the wrong way around. It's wide world or worldwide. It's odd.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with this one from SQL BI, you get a Contoso. Contoso is Microsoft's dummy trading name. So when they do demos, Contoso is quite often what you see. Where you get a list of orders. In this one, we have, I think it's 4.5 million orders I asked for. But the order lines, because an order can have multiple lines, is about 10 million, roughly about 10 million. But what's really cool about that data generator is it generates decent data. If you do completely random data, your visuals will look awful because it's completely random. So you'll have one person will order one time for £1 million, and one person will order 100 times but a penny each. You know, that level of randomness just doesn't look good. So if you want truly good random data, I would recommend the data generator from SQL BI, and Kurt Buehler's talk through of how to do it is really good. So you get orders, you get order rows. An order belongs to a customer. Weirdly, they can have line 1 shipped to address 1, line 2 shipped to address 2, which I found quite interesting. I'm thinking like Amazon. I guess when you order something from Amazon, you can choose where you get it sent. So again, it's a good demonstration data set. I did have to do some things to tweak it a little bit. Let me just open that up. Can you see my modal windows, just out of interest?
I can, yeah. Yep, yes.
Cool. So hopefully that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Right, so I'm going to share all these afterwards as well. So I had to do a little bit of tweaking to because I wanted to show things from 2020 to 2023. Just so you know, some dates which are around about now. I had to just make some changes. I put a created column on, which I set so the product is created the first time it's ever ordered. It's quite straightforward. And same thing for customer. The customer is set up the first time they place an order. It's so that we can demonstrate slowly changing dimensions. So on that basis, I generated the data going into the future as well, so that, and I'll show you that in a second actually. When we set up the data factory, we can do incremental loads. A lot of times when you do dummy data, that's quite hard to set up. So this example, which I will write fully down, again, apologies, I've just had my mind elsewhere. I will write it fully down and send it out to your audience, so you've all got a share of it. So yes, we changed the dates. I added some things which I find really useful in Power BI. If you have a date dimension, first of all, you need a date dimension. If anyone tells you you don't, they're wrong. Pretty strong, but I think they are. You do need a date dimension, and a really useful set of columns you can have on that is a relative day. So as you refresh your date dimension every day, yesterday becomes -1, the day before that is -2. So you can set up Power BI reports. You've got relative date filtering anyway in Power BI, but I find that's a little bit quirky when it comes to I want to show everything in this month, for example, or this month and last month, or this year including this month. All those things I find Power BI sometimes doesn't do what I want it to. So having these columns available are really useful, because I could just set it to add relative month equals 0, and then as soon as we move on to a new day, all the reports will reset to being the current month. No one has to go in and change anything. Now that one you can actually do in Power BI itself, but the point is I think Power BI itself doesn't do much with quarters. So if you wanted to do this quarter, I don't think I guess you could do a relative 3 months rolling, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can do things like relative financial quarter, By having a date dimension, you could do that. Let's say your financial data starts in February rather than January. You could use these columns. I'm just saying they are a good idea to have.
I almost implement those in every solution I touch upon, because it's just that everyday hack that gives you the ability to do dynamic data filtering out of the box. So
yeah, and it's also let's say you're not using Power BI, maybe using a different tool to
exactly.
pull the data through. It gives you that ability. Yes. I saw a comment there from.
Perhaps I'm picky, but date is reverse data type, reserved data types. Go to name the table date, dim date, or similar.
Yeah, I totally agree. So this this data.date, that's what comes out of SQL BI. When we get over to our data warehouse, it's not called data date at that point. It's called dim date. Because you're right, you shouldn't call things date. If it's a reserved word, if it goes pink in SQL Management Studio, don't call your objects that. It's just going to cause you problems. In fact, a really interesting one I did find, if anyone's particularly interested. So let me finish SQL off. So this is the tables it generates. I prefer generally my reports that the order header and the order line are in a single table. I just find it's easier. Yes, it does repeat data. But when your average order is something like 1.2 lines, it's not that much different. I just personally prefer it. I think it's a personal choice. Pure star scheme, I think you would have a header table and a line table. But it's your choice. For me, I've just created a view here to bring the header and the line together. So orders and order rows. I've just brought those together. Yes, sorry. So this is the demo table, data.date. And then if you go down, this is the SQL DB that was created by pressing deploy on the Microsoft site. And you can see there's absolutely no date.date, data.date. That's not allowed. What I would do is have a dim.date. Now, this is where I say I haven't actually, where I've fallen down, I didn't get to set up my dims and facts, which is frustrating and annoying. But hopefully the idea of the architecture is you click on deploy, you have SQL DB, you do all your work there, you have Power BI pointing to it. That's the hour and a half session sorted. That's it. That comment is done. That's how you do it. I will finish them off and I will send it out to people. The idea being, well, I've looked at online a few times. When you're starting to create a data warehouse, if it's new to you, you can read the theory. That's readily available. The actual code, how to make a slowly changing dimension type 1, 2, 4, 6, whatever. I don't think there's that codes out there that much, or if it is, it's the stuff I found is problematic. So what I want to do at the end of this is I will share this is good code for dealing, and it's used in production in a few of clients I'm working with. So it's proven code that you would ordinarily. So again, another reason why this is a cheap solution is you're not paying for someone to come in and provide this code for you. I'm going to give it to you as part of this. You will still at some point, if you're not data warehouse knowledgeable, you probably still need to bring somebody in, but it's a great starter for figuring out some things. We also include, I'm also going to include logging, some logging stored procedures, and some toolbox stored procedures. So actually, if you go to my, I'm going to change my screen I'm sharing now. If you go to my, there we go, you should be seeing Chrome again. So I've got a gist, not that one, that's GitHub. Yeah, so if you go to gist.github.com Data Quality UK, which is the name of my company, I've got 35 different gists, so just code snippets I use all the time in various projects. Feel free, they're all open. Most of what I'm showing today is already in there. All of it will be in there. So the person who mentioned about date, actually I quite often do a ref.date. A reference schema. In this example, I'll read the schemas out now actually. In this example, we have a landing schema. We have the way you land your data, raw data. Some people call it raw, some people call it landing, some people call it staging. Point is, it's data you're pulling from your source system, completely unchanged. You land it. We'll then have a preparation or prep schema where we do some things like tidy up some data types. So maybe you've brought it in from a CSV file and you've just dumped it into varchar 8000s or mvarchar 4000. Prep is a good place to start resolving your data types, start making some simple calculations. So say if you have a total price, you've got a quantity and you've got a unit price in your source data, and you want to calculate what those two times together are. Prep's a good place to do it. It's just where you start just tidying things up and start to join. Maybe you've got data coming in from CRM system, maybe you've got data coming in from a finance system. Prep's a good layer to start joining them together and saying, actually, I trust the data that is related to a customer from CRM more, whereas I trust the data about the finance, how much has been billed, from the finance system. So you can bring these two systems, the point of a data warehouse. We then also have a DIM schema and a fact schema. I prefer that. Some people, you will notice in this solution actually there's nothing in the DBO schema. I try and avoid that because it tends to be a slush pit. It's where everything ends up, and DBO doesn't tell you anything. So I prefer it to be in a schema which is named because it has a purpose. And if it is just you're testing something, in this example we have a schema called ztest. So anything you should think, if you've put anything into that schema, you should be not shocked if someone deletes it or changes it, because ztest is not designed to be to use, and your DBA should probably clear it down every couple of days. But it's a nice slush pit for playing. We could also have there's a logging schema. So every time we transform data, it will log when we start, when we end, how many rows got inserted, how many rows got updated, how many rows got deleted. That's all audited. It also audits from Data Factory. So we can say this is how much data came in, or that a pipeline failed. So the idea being for some clients that, again, they have SQL knowledge and maybe they don't want to go anywhere near Azure. Once you've got the Data Factory pipeline set up, provided you've set them up in the correct way, if it's all metadata driven, so I haven't done that in this example yet, but I will do. You could actually just have the SQL table in this database, and they just change a 0 to a 1, and then all of a sudden Data Factory on its next run through will pick up that table, create it, populate it. So it's all driven. So the idea is it's easy. If you know SQL, instead of saying to a client you need to learn Data Factory, you need someone with maybe analysis services skills, maybe you need someone with all these different skills. You can say, look, as long as they come in and they're pretty good at, or reasonably okay at SQL, you'll be able to get this entire solution end to end. This solution will work if you know SQL. I think that's a powerful thing. It does mean it's not always the fastest. It does mean it's not always the cheapest, but the cost of being minimal skills required, I think it's worth mentioning. So yeah, so that's my gist. Brian, did you share that, or shall I share that? I'll share.
Yeah, what? Sorry.
the link to my gists or gists or however we're referring to it. It's just
you just have it there in the chat. Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Yeah. So it's just a load of SQL scripts mostly. I think there's some Databricks stuff in there as well. Some stored procedures that you'll find really useful if you're setting up your first data warehouse. And it's the stuff you never find anywhere. It's the stuff people normally charge you for. So here, have it for free. that's what we're doing today. So these are all, I've set these all up as they're full. They're just quite basic. Go get this. So I parameterized it, so that's best practice. Rather than having a data set for each table, I've just parameterized it. So I've created a data set called on-premise SQL Server that points at the SQL Server in this demo, and I've parameterized the schema and the name. So we only have one data set, and I've called it ds underscore, and the pipeline's a pl underscore. Again, I picked up that best practice. I think that was from Juiced as well. I looked at some of the pipelines he produced, because I use his pipelines for Power BI metadata extraction. They're really good pipelines that you can just download and use yourself. Let's have a look. So but I also give an example of incremental load. So the customers is an incremental load where in this simple example, we just go to the data warehouse version of the table and we say, what's the last value you had? What's the maximum modified value? And then we pass that to the query and say, look, get me everything from that table where modified is after the last one we saw. But also, because this is set up so you can demonstrate incremental loads, it's also got a where clause for less than right now. So I was working on this before. To be honest, I thought the call was at 7 UK time, not 6. So apologies for that. So again, this is parameterized. So for an increment, you could just call this incremental load pipeline, giving it different table name, and it will run. You could say get customers, get products, get orders incrementally, and the same pipeline will run for all three. Parameterizing things in Data Factory is a very good idea. It's just a lot easier to maintain. I didn't show it in here, but for people who are new to it, you can create folders as well. So wanted to, you could have, and you can nest folders. So you sort that out how you like. They all run. It doesn't make any difference what folders they're in. That doesn't impact anything. It's just purely to help you maintain the solution. Right. So we look up a watermark. Because I've chosen query here, it's not going to make use of the schema and the name, but it does want something populated. So we just put X and X, so don't let that confuse you. Go get the data from that table where we did that, and then this bit, which I didn't quite get working at this point, is it will audit onto the SQL Server. It will stamp the pipeline started at this time, it ended at this time, and we inserted this many records for the success route. For the error route, it just says we inserted 0. This is when it started, this is when it finished, and we had an error, and it will capture the error as well, but put it into SQL. So you could have your Power BI reports pointed at SQL. There are other ways. I mean, you could use log analytics. You could get your logs stored into log analytics, but then you need to learn KQL to interrogate that data. So again, for the idea being, it's the cheapest, easiest solution rather than cheapest. There we go. So their full load, their incremental load. I didn't show you at the beginning actually, but I should have talked to this. Apologies, I'm hoping people can keep up because I'm going around a little bit. It's because the database it sets up is a it's a cloud-based database, you can scale it. The ultimate cheapness is you could put it on a serverless SQL database, so that when you're not using it, after an hour, it'll spin down and cost nothing other than the storage costs for whatever you've got stored in SQL. I haven't done that because actually an S0 is $14 a month. It's pretty cheap. It's just...
What is true?
Pardon?
What? Sorry? Who said something? Everyone is... No, sorry. There you go. Sorry. Yeah, just go ahead, James.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. So this, I'm going to provide pipelines, which came from... I think this is a Danish guy as well. So it looks... That area of the world, that's me being not particularly intelligent about names, potentially.
No, those are not Danish. So
they're not. Never mind. but up northern Europe. I'm sure they're northern Europe. So what I find really important with this work, the work I do, and when I'm training people and showing people how to do things, there's very little you can claim to be your own. If you're reinventing the wheel every single time, that's not ideal. You're better off learning from people and borrowing from people and bringing things together. So if anyone does demonstrate this on to other people, please can you reference the people I'm referencing. This is, I got it from this Microsoft by BI tools. They deserve the credit for putting it together because it's a really nice, easy resource to follow and set things up. So they talk you through how to scale SQLDB up. So it starts, normally we have it in S0, which is $14 per month. Sorry, I'm just looking at a message. Definitely looks fast to add new tables from data sources this way. I guess into select staff nodes. Correct. So what Henrik is saying is, from what I mentioned about the controlling which tables get data downloaded from in a metadata way in SQL, yes, it's very easy, but also it does come with the problems you mentioned, which is if someone amends the source system so it has an extra column, that could cause problems because we're using copy data and that doesn't have the schema drift option. If you're using data flows in Data Factory, you can say, look, the schema might drift, and if it does, do this. Copy data it expects what you set it up, it will still run that way essentially. But we can still drive it by metadata, and I have done this before as well. And I think actually there is now a template from Microsoft that helps you do it. The metadata table can include the columns. So instead of the copy data wouldn't just be select from this schema, this table, you could dynamically generate the query script, and you can say select column A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever, from source, where you can do the where clause dynamically as well in metadata. I tend not to implement that because that tends to confuse people and things break quite often. But the columns certainly, because if you name them, if they add a column, it's not gonna impact you. If they drop a column, that will impact you. There's not really many ways around that. You could wrap everything in his nulls, but the fact that the column doesn't even exist, the source system would, assuming you're pulling from a source from a SQL, it would throw an error anyway. So I think that was a long way of saying you're right, but there is a way of doing the metadata so that you name columns as well. It's a little bit more involved. You start getting involved with storing JSON in SQL, which has never been a very pleasant experience. It's fine the first time you do it, but when you want to update it it just becomes a little bit nasty. So I haven't found a good solution for that. So if anyone has one, please ping it out.
I do think that if you need something like a dynamic drifting data warehouse thing, then you can use BIML to generate your data factory packages automatically based on metadata, but you still need the metadata, so there's no way around that. So
yeah, I've not used BIML with Data Factory yet. I used to use it in SSIS, and it's amazing. It's such a good tool.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen it. I've seen Catherine. What's the surname? Can't remember.
Wilhelmsen.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen her mention BIML for. She was always BIML for SSIS. Maybe she hasn't. I think she's mentioned it much for Data Factory, but I have seen it.
Yeah.
Have you used it yourself?
Yeah. It's quite a powerful tool because based 100% on metadata, you can auto generate all your data factory packages, pipelines, and then deploy them, and then you're good to go. Nice.
Yeah, that's cool. Going back quite a way now, I forgot to mention it. When you first set up that, when you press button and it deploys everything, it doesn't set you up with a source control for Data Factory. So you do need to go in and just configure a GitHub. So I think I showed you accidentally anyway. Within my Git, I've got that Data Factory is in there. You can make it private. I've got it public because it's all demo data. I don't mind sharing it. Yeah, so you can source control Data Factory, whereas it's not quite. It's not what BIML brings to the table. But you mentioned source control, so it made me think about it. So yeah, that's there. So you get that from there. This is the schedule up down. There's another guy, Erwin de Krook. So he's probably Northern Europe as well. That's surname. He does a little bit more about how to set up the scaling a SQL database in terms of setting up so the way I've got it set up is you've got an if condition essentially, but he shows how to do until. You can do until in Data Factory as well. So until if it's paused and you want to make it live, say you've got your SQL DB set up as a serverless DB, you can do an until condition, until activity, and you can check what is the status of it. If it's paused, you can send a web API. You can post to say, I want you to go live now, and the until will you can get it to spool until it's ready. Because with Data Factory, if we're talking about costs, every activity is a cost. It's a very small cost, so which I learned to my expense actually. One of the first projects I set up, it was what was it? Power BI. I got the details of Power BI activities, and then I was calling the API to get more details. But there was about 5,000 or 6,000 activity events happening on a day, and using Azure Data Factory to go and get that data. Bad idea. It costs quite a lot of money if you do that. So if you can do things like instead of just submitting a thing to say go get me all the data from this date to that date, it's worth doing a lookup first. So that's counterintuitive to what I just said, but a lookup is very, very cheap. So it's worth doing a lookup to say, is there any data to get? No, well, don't do anything then. If there's data to get, then run the copy data activity. So it sounds counterintuitive because you're actually running extra activities, but they're cheap activities. A lookup is ridiculously cheap. So yeah, I recommend setting that up to keep your costs down. But yeah, so this is a again parameterized. So I can just say I want my database to be a service level 0, and it will downscale. Or I can say I want it to be a service level 2, and it will upscale. A word of not caution, it's just an awareness piece really. If you go from standard 2 to standard 3, or standard 0, 1, or 2 to standard 3, you will usually get quite a long spin-up time, and it's because you are moving from spinny hard drives to flash hard drives.
Yes.
Which, if you're talking a 50 gig data warehouse, that could take you 20, 25, possibly more minutes. And then you start querying, well, actually, can I just leave it on an S3? How much does that cost? If you're getting up to those sizes. Yeah, that's because I did that and I couldn't understand why it was taking so long to spin up. And that's the reason. It literally has to copy all the data from one set of disks to another set of disks. Whereas 0, 1, and 2, they all stay on the same disk. It just changes the RAM and the CPU. That's my understanding, anyway. So you can scale a database up, scale it down. I like to call it the sword, which is on Just's thing. So this is the sword that I quite like. You scale up at the very beginning. You copy your source systems across to your landing zone. Let me zoom in. Yeah, so you scale up. You copy all your data across to your SQL DB. You do your transformation, you do your DIMs, your facts, whatever you need to do. And then in Just's example, you then call the Power BI dataset refresh. At the end of it, you scale your SQL DB down because there's no point having it sat there burning lots of money when no one's querying it. So for costs effectiveness, spin it up, spin it down. Okay. That's actually it. That's all I've got to say, I think.
There was a question popping up in my mind. With all this scaling and delta loading and incremental loading, have you tried the new fully supported feature for change data capture in Data Factory?
Is that the upsert, or are you talking about where you can do?
I think was it in December they released a change data capture for the read on the SQL Server. If you enable change data capture on the SQL Server, then Data Factory is now fully adhering to change data capture reads, so it only reads what you need to read.
Okay, I wasn't aware of it. As well. I think I read it, but I haven't read into it. So yeah, good reminder. I should go look at that. Have you done it? Is it quite easy to set up?
No, I haven't tried it. That's my question. So.
Okay. No worries. Yeah. Well, related to what you've mentioned, there is another way of. So this came about in, I think it was August, roughly. That's in Microsoft. The world's always changing. So something that might be quite hard that you make manual workarounds. Frustratingly, they might make it really easy a few months later. So one of them things being you can now do an upsert. So if you got all of your data from source, because it doesn't support change data capture, maybe it's a source that doesn't support that. And there's no last modified date, and it's not an incremental integer identity. So you literally can't detect until you've got it all what's changed. They brought this function, the upsert function. And when you do that, you have to tell it what the key is. You tell it what the key columns are. And it will then compare all of the data it's got from source in memory to the data it's got in destination. If it exceeds memory, it does spill to TempDB. I think it might use TempDB all the time. No, it spills to TempDB if it can't do all in memory. It's not bad. I still prefer to handle that myself in SQL. I don't like the way it does it. For what it uses a merge behind the scenes, and Microsoft keep pushing merge, and it still has the problems it's always had. So in the example, which I will show you when I finished it off, when I were doing the slowly changing dimensions, we don't use the merge command. We use an intersect. So we do select from dataset A, intersect dataset B. Sorry, not intersect, accept dataset B, just to identify which ones have changed. And the reason we do that is if you've got a null in dataset A and a null in dataset B, the accept method will say they're the same, whereas most other methods don't. If you were to say, if you join on a column, if you join two tables together and it's a null value, it won't join because null isn't null. So nearly always null isn't null. Apart from intersect and accept, they're the exception to the rule, because for them, a null does equal null. So then you can, it's just quite, instead of having to wrap all of your columns with is null this blank string, is null that blank string, is null that 0 equal, instead of having to wrap everything in is nulls, you just use the accept. It's much neater. Becomes very easy. You can actually generate, I've got a stored procedure which generates these slowly changing dimension scripts dynamically. You just point it and go, right, that table's going to be a slowly changing dimension now, and it will generate all the code for you, which is nice and quick. And it also helps people, if you're new to data warehousing, you can have a look at what that stored procedure does and reverse engineer it and go, oh, okay, that's, you know, that's it. We need to know a key column. We need to know. So I use temporal tables for slowly changing dimensions quite often. Not always, but quite often. I know there are people who think they are great for it. I'm one of them. And there are people who think they are rubbish for it. I'm not one of them. So it depends on how you feel about that. The solution I'm going to send out does make use of temporal tables. I find them when dealing with clients, actually a temporal table for your persisted staging area is really useful, because when you start out, so again, I'm not entirely sure who the audience is for tonight, but if you're working with a client, they'll quite often say, oh yeah, we don't care about that column changing. Okay, 6 months down the line, oh, we need to know who changed that column and when that column changed. Well, we weren't tracking it, so can't help you. If you have a persisted staging area with temporal tables set up, and you do inserts and updates, etc., you can then, for any column, you can say, right, we weren't doing anything with it downstream, but we were at least tracking that it changed. So when people have spun up their own source system and they say that column can never change without the last updated column also being updated, that is almost 99.9% never true. Someone can go in and do an update and not touch the updated column, and all of a sudden you've got no idea that row's changed. So yeah, I mean, Chris has just turned his camera on, so Chris works for me. Chris, you must have heard enough conversations with a particular client I'm thinking of, where they guarantee that data will never change, and the amount of times we've been able to pull their ass out the fire by having temporal table just to go, fine, we've got it tracked. Even though you've deleted it all, we've got it tracked. It's fine.
Yeah, absolutely, every time.
So I think temporal tables are golden.
Yes, they are.
Excuse me for being late, by the way. I was shouting at my children. I'll leave you to it.
That's fine, Chris. Nice to meet you.
One word of caution. I think this is slightly off topic. Temporal table. If you've got 1 million rows and you do an update and you say update column A to equal value 1 where it is value 1, now that isn't going to change anything because you're just changing it from what it is to what it is. The temporal table doesn't care. Exactly. It will generate a record for all. So that's a problem. So there's no real good way of stopping that, which is why updates should be done through stored procedures.
There's actually a comment from Henrik. One suggestion is to add a database trigger on the insert date column at least, and then in the merge approach add a column for the update date.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea. I was going to do it in this solution, but I put a clustered column store index on the table, which wouldn't let me put an index on it. Wouldn't let me put a trigger on it. Unfortunately, you can't put a trigger on if you've got a clustered column store index.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, at the right point, Henrik, good point. It's absolutely, definitely something you can do, and it's a case-by-case approach. Can you amend the source system? Yes, then do it there.
Yes,
I've seen it before where people put a trigger on that if there's an update, put the old version in another table somewhere, just in case you ever need to roll it back. I generally avoid triggers where possible. I don't know if that's old school thinking or not. I just try and avoid triggers, and I avoid cursors. I think that's.
I think both triggers and cursors are actually, from what I'm schooled, the no-go on it as well.
Yeah.
So I know that they are emerging to be okay to use, but for me personally, I wouldn't go there unless I was forced to do it. So
yeah, I'd say cursors I have used more often. They're not too bad now. Triggers, they hurt. And they can start causing problems personally. I guess being on the analytics side rather than the operational side, that's where the difference is. I think you use triggers more if you're operational.
Exactly.
So again, I think it's the third time I've mentioned. Apologies, this isn't as polished as it should be, but I know it's your first session, and I didn't want to leave you with nothing to present. I'm sure Brian could have backed us up anyway, and
sure.
You've got one in your pocket ready to go.
Always.
So yeah, apologies, not as polished as it should be, but hopefully that ability to click on deploy and have pretty much all the components you need. That I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
Just be careful that I think when it does it by default, it goes into an S3 on the SQLDB.
Yes.
That's the only thing that costs money. So if you are going to try this, the first thing to do is to knock that down to either an S0, which is $14, or serverless, where it'll actually switch off while you're not using it.
And then just go data lake.
Yeah. Well, that's why I thought it was a great solution, because even if you go down a Databricks route, same solution.
Yeah.
If you do part lake, part so if you went with the Just's solution, it works for that as well, because it gives you your Databricks and it gives you your data lake and it gives you SQLDB. So if any takeaway, that sports analytics is what Microsoft label it as. It's such a great solution to have for a very quick deployment. Just a shame the resource names are awful.
Yeah, exactly. I just added the link to Just's blog post about the traditional modern data as well on GitHub. So
yeah, it's really good. I've seen Just SQLBits. I was monitoring his room for him last year, 2022. Yeah, it's really good. So this session is inspired by, but not a copy of. I hope.
Yeah.
I hope it adds some extra value or some different value.
Sure did, James.
Cool.
Thank you for attending, and thank you all. Perhaps once again I should show you the discount code. Not that I get any affiliation out of this. This is just a service to you. There's a discount code for SQLBits. It's this one. Please use it. I just got it today. You can get 5% off, and the early bird tickets are closing in, I think it's next week or something.
Yeah, I was going to say discount plus early bird is now's a good time.
Exactly. So use this code, and then you get another 5% off. So hurry up. And if any questions are not coming, then I would like to thank you all for attending, and thank you, James, a lot for coming. And I hope your mom is getting okay.
Yeah, she's getting better. This is actually the 5th or 6th stroke, depends which one you count. So we're getting quite good at it.
Okay.
Sadly, it's a skill I never wanted to get good at, but she's okay.
Okay, great. Nice to hear. And have a great evening, all.
Anyway,
Thank you. Bye.
thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.